Growing up in the 1980s, you would have been exposed to this show about a pair of redneck cousins fighting the law in Hazzard country by getting into endless police car chases with a dim-witted, corrupt and bumbling sheriff. Yes, there were subplots, often involving the corrupt Commissioner Boss Hogg, that precluded the car chase, but they were mostly forgettable. Now, everybody loved this show for the hammy acting, silly car chases and stunts. Much like Knight Rider that would follow it, the orange Confederate General Lee Dodge Charger would be involved in one big jump per episode, where the screen car would get an amazing slow-mo jump shot, which would probably end up trashing it. No doubt the show's budget must have been fairly big with all the demolished cars, but I guess it proved a popular enough show to warrant all the stunts and famous enough to get this attempt at a video game. Now, once in a while, I like to go back into the very beginnings of software companies just to dig up and learn something about the history of gaming. This time, I'll be digging into one of the earlier games by Elite Systems Ltd, and that game is Dukes of Hazzard. Now, as bad as it was though, it remained in my memory for whatever reason, and in my mind could have been a lot better had the designers had a little bit more imagination and perhaps ability to put their ideas properly into code. And you know, as it is, the Dukes of Hazzard game ended up having no credits for the crew that were involved. I think they were a bit embarrassed to put their names to this game. Anyway, let's get into the game. Was it good or was it pish? Let's find out. So, there were two versions released. There was the ZX Spectrum game that was released in 1985, and then the Commodore 64 version, which was released later in 1987. So surely the Commodore 64 game would be a better game given that it was released later. Well, anyway, let's find out. Let's start by looking at the Commodore 64 game, shall we? Anyway, the game hasn't really got much of a plot, if I'll be honest with you. Boss Hogg threatens to seize the General Lee as collateral unless Bo Duke and Luke Duke can provide $5,000 that are owed to him. So, Bo and Luke enter the annual Hazzard Country cross-country road race, hoping to win the first place prize of $5,000, but Hogg and the Hazzard Country police attempt to halt their efforts. The game is played as a continuously scrolling roadway. The way the game plays is, for lack of a better word, infernal. In each level, you have to get the General Lee to the end of the road, hopefully without getting your car trashed along the way. But in hot pursuit is this sheriff in his police car who will prevent your car from changing lanes if he gets in front of you. Additionally, there is a helicopter, a hot air balloon and a biplane which drop bombs from above depending on the level. Additionally, there are oncoming cars to avoid, which you can do by either changing lanes, jumping over them, or by lobbing dynamite at them with the spacebar. The last method being the most useless. Typically the exploding car wreck will often hit your car, causing you to crash anyway, although it does look funny. And as fun as this has the potential to sound, I'm sorry to say none of it is. Oh, and you must not throw dynamite at the Jeep, which is driven by Daisy, one of your guys, in case you were not aware. And when all lives are lost, a tow truck will come to drag your car away, additionally taking forever to do it while you're waiting to play the game again. Now, for starters, this game has a whole litany of sins. For starters, the game would often glitch upon just starting up. If you were lucky, the background would glitch and your car would be invulnerable to collisions, allowing you a free ride to level 2, where the game would glitch some more and destroy all your cars for no good reason. And when it wasn't glitching out and playing properly, you needed perfect time to jump the oncoming cars and slowing down just in time to avoid the aerial bombs, which are more annoying than do anything to add to the gameplay. And occasionally there'd be a petrol station on the road which would come at you so fast you'd need perfect reflexes to jump, and eventually the road would narrow to a single lane, meaning that you had to jump the cars rather than swerve to avoid them. Overall, the game just isn't fun and it feels unfair. There's only 3 backgrounds if memory serves me correctly, and they're all the same and they just loop. Flippin' heck, perfect time to jump cars as a gameplay device is just dull. The bombs from above seem to be occasionally and randomly impossible to avoid. And if you're hit by them, it just seems like bad luck that you were there. So overall, it's not a great game. When the level hasn't completely glitched out, the graphics are only barely functional. Oncoming cars aren't even multicolour sprites and they look like cardboard cutouts. The backgrounds look drab, boring and repetitive. Regards to the sound, oh god, make it stop, just motor noises and the constant police car siren whine. It's only punctuated by your car crashing. And you get the Dixie car horn ditty when you start the game, but that's the only music. So for me the game is probably only playable only because you want to see all the 3 background stages, which loop anyway. And I suppose there is some fun to be had in smacking innocent cars with dynamite to watch them explode. But apart from that, there's not much else. So, I suppose we'll have a look at the ZX Spectrum version now, yes? Now, what I've already said about the Commodore 64 is much the same for the ZX Spectrum. However, there are slight differences in both versions, so let's have a look at that. Let's have a look at the ZX Spectrum. Now, let's get to the actual irritating bits. For starters, in the Spectrum version, any collision with any other vehicle costs you 1 of your 3 lives. While on the Commodore 64, this has been fixed slightly by giving you some slack. The police cars will not trouble you in any other way than constantly wailing the siren and occasionally driving behind you. This, I gather, must have been the result of the programmer forgetting to implement all the elements into the conversion. Who knows? The Spectrum version also allows you to only drive on 1 of the 2 lanes, while the Commodore 64 version gives you more freedom of adjustment. But I have to say, I don't really know which one is the less useless method for this game. You see, this game has no depth of perception whatsoever. If you happen to be driving on the lower lane and you need to jump for whatever reason, you will crash if there is a vehicle passing you on the higher lane. On the Commodore 64, this depth problem is even worse, because you can throw a dynamite from the lower lane and make it hit a vehicle on the higher lane, which wouldn't happen on the Spectrum version. The problem is even worse in that the dynamite will never blow something up in the lower lane, which forces you to jump over cars in the later halves of each level. This depth problem also makes dodging bullets and bombs from flying vehicles really irritating. I mean, one of the reasons why the game plays so badly is because it's been attempted to make prettier than the programmer had skill to do properly. The game does have some pretty nice parallax scrolling, giving some sort of illusion of distance for the background, but the scrolling on neither version represents the speed nearly as well as it should. Also, the effect of your acceleration and deceleration to the descending bullets and bombs from the planes and hot air balloons is almost worthless and has no touch of realism whatsoever. I suppose the Commodore 64 version's scrolling has a slightly more effective illusion of speed. So for once I'm torn about whether or not it's a good thing that the Commodore 64 version has better scrolling, because while it does make it generally easier to control your car, it also gives less reaction time. In this game, having time for calculating your chances of survival in various situations and allowing things to happen in their own time is pivotal. It just happens to be an equation you wouldn't really want to have in a racing-based action game. And sadly, the Spectrum version also requires pixel-perfect jumping, which is painful when you need to concentrate on the speed, the helicopter bullets and even the character block sizes that the sprites occupy. The Commodore 64 version gives you a little bit more room for error in this regard. Now, while there are only 3 levels in the game, it is much more than enough to bear. In case anyone's interested, the Commodore 64 version doesn't have a proper ending, nor does it have an intro cutscene, both of which the Spectrum version has. This sort of thing could eat up any intrigue of attempting to finish the game. I don't really think it applies in this case, but still, less is less. And in any case, both versions of the game have their own specific problems, which are bad enough not to include this in the equation. So I would put it like this, the Spectrum version has an irritating gas problem, as well as no slack on collisions, while the Commodore 64 version has worse depth problems. Now, with regards to the sound and music, I would be very interested to know the reason behind the game developers' decision not to include a rendition of the theme tune of the show, because my guess would be that they thought it was too boring in context of the game to bother doing. Now, if you remember, the original theme tune for the Dukes of Hazzard is a country western style tune, this one being one of the late Waylon Jennings, the Guru Boys, which is a fairly slow piece written for the 1980 album Music Man. I mean, as a kid I really liked that tune, but whatever the reason, it wouldn't have made the game any better, it really wouldn't have. Instead, the only piece of music you'll be hearing in either version is the first 12 of all too familiar notes, I Wish I Was a Dixie, and with any luck, you might be hearing it multiple times per game. And the reason for this, of course, is because it's the famous customised horn signal of the Duke Boys 1969 Dodge Charger. But it should be noted though that the melody is a bit wrong in both versions of the game, as it starts with a note 2 full steps below what it should be. Oh well. And for the sound effects, I'm afraid they aren't all that much to talk about either. Most of the sounds in the Spectrum version are quick little dit noises in various pitches depending on what is making the noise at each time. The primary noise, of course, is your own car making a few different noises depending on what you're doing, but you can hear the other traffic on the road as well as the airborne hazards doing their things. At least in the Commodore 64, all the engine noises sound more like engine noises, and 3 sound effects can be heard simultaneously, the second of which is nearly constant police siren wailing. The Spectrum version has better explosion and crash sounds, and even has an exclusive bomb dropping sound effect for Game Over, but the Commodore 64 version's sound effects are miles ahead, technically anyway. The horn signal has been made rhythmically more correct in the Spectrum, but that ticking noises, it just gave me a bit of a headache. So to be honest, with regards to sounds, I'm not really sure which one I hate less. Now, with regards to the ratings for the ZX Spectrum, Crash Magazine rated the ZX Spectrum version 63% and praised the graphics but criticised the gameplay. Crash later wrote that there isn't much except the General Lee graphics to connect the game with the TV series. Your Computer rated the ZX Spectrum 3 stars and wrote, "The screen display is excellent and the game is rather more playable than some of Elite's previous offerings." Computer and Video Games said that Dukes of Hazzard fans would enjoy the ZX Spectrum version, writing that while it isn't as spectacular as one of those amazing stunts you see the General Lee perform on TV, it ain't bad either. The graphics are nice and the scrolling pretty smooth. The magazine wrote that the game can become addicting upon getting used to the controls. Now, Home Computing Weekly gave the ZX Spectrum 2 stars out of 5, and it called the game boring, in part because of the inability to change its difficulty settings. The publication noted the limited graphics are very well drawn, the sound is simple but effective, and machine code ensures a smooth movement of vehicles and scrolling. And finally, the 3 critics for Yours Sinclair gave the ZX Spectrum version a negative review, criticising the controls and poor collision detection, although one reviewer felt that the game had the potential to become a commercial success. So, there you go, that was the ratings for the ZX Spectrum. Pretty average, I suppose. So there you have it, that was my retrospective review of Dukes of Hazzard on the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum. You can certainly tell that this game was likely unfinished and pushed out onto Elite's first hit pack as a filler, which is how I got it back in the late 1980s too. The quality of this game is not very good, and it's just as well that this was the only place it was released. So I suppose the game is a hazard in itself, which you really should avoid. But, however, in saying all that, if this is your kind of game and you disagree with my thoughts, well, all I've got to say is, yeah, get them Duke boys.